Hi, good afternoon everybody, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Julia Dracon and I'm the coordinator for the local resilience forum, LLR Prepared. Firstly, I'd like to apologise for the change in the webinar format from the original plan. This is for arrangements beyond our control, but hopefully you've been able to access the presentation that we put on the website and have been able to take your time and watch that prior to this Q&A session. So the focus of today's session and of the presentation is around being a community flood warden and what does that entail. So the presentation took you through the general arrangements around being a community flood warden, what's involved, what you can expect to be involved in, both in the planning for a flood emergency during the response, how that role interacts with emergency responders, and also during the cleanup stage of a flooding incident as well. And then we talked a little bit about the kind of people and the kind of skills that we would expect a community flood warden to have. So without any further ado, I'm going to take you through the technical bit, so please bear with me. We want you to be able to ask any questions of us that you might have, which you can send in to us using the instant messaging facility, which should be visible to you on your screen. If you can see a box saying one new message, please click on that. Please click on read, to open up the dialog box. If you can't see that box, then please click the bottom button in the left-hand side of your screen, which has a speech bubble on it. And this should also open up the dialog box, which will then enable you to ask any questions that you might have. If you're having problems with either of those options, then please feel free to email us any questions that you might have. We won't be able to respond to them during this webinar, but we will follow up with you shortly afterwards. And the email address is emergency.management@leics.gov.uk. So moving on to some questions then. We did have a couple send in before the webinar actually started. And the first one was about how much time does being a flood warden take? Excuse me. I'm suffering with my own winter cold flu issue. How much time does being a flood warden take? Well, the answer really is it's very much up to you. How much time do you have to be able to dedicate to being a community flood warden? There are no set requirements for our expectations of what you will be able to undertake. We are very much looking at the level of risk within an area as well. So very much down to both your individual circumstances and the risk in the local area and how much support that community might actually need or benefit from. The second question we had through is linked to the first, and it's around, well, what if a flood warning came through and I was on holiday? What would happen then? Well, again, there are no requirements on you to be available at all times, to be available when flood alerts come through. It is very much a volunteer basis, and any efforts that you undertake in this valued community role would be purely based on your own availability. What we would say is that if you are planning to be away on holiday and you were a community flood warden and we were perhaps heading into a season in which we'd expect to see a few flood warnings come through or weather predictions that might suggest that, then we would recommend that you buddy up with another flood warden perhaps in your area, perhaps encourage other local residents to directly sign up to flood alert systems to make sure that we're covering that as much as we can. But very much we want to emphasise that this is a voluntary role and there are no requirements or minimum expectations that are placed upon that role at all. So going to the screens now, if I could just scroll up here, so please bear with me. How much will I need to know about flooding before I sign up to be a flood warden? We don't have any expectation about a minimum understanding or knowledge of flood risk, either on a general basis or about your local flooding arrangements. That would be provided during the training. So during the presentation, you saw that the Resilience Partnership would come out, spend some time with you as an interested party and go through with you what those arrangements are. That would be a briefing, and then there'd be also some ongoing help and support through that network again, should you ever have any questions. We do have a Resilience Partnership officer who is on duty 24/7. So if ever an alert came through and you weren't quite sure what to do with it, a number will be given to you that you can call and get advice and information. So moving down, what should I do if I see a motorist stuck in floodwater? We do have a number of roads across the county which are prone to flooding, and it can happen that motorists do drive into that floodwater and become stuck. It is extremely important, and one of the main underpinning elements of being a community flood warden is that you do not, under any circumstances, put yourself in any danger, and to think about the safety of both yourself and others, members of the public that might be involved in the flood at all times. So if you saw a motorist stuck in the floodwater, then it is very much a call to 999 and let the emergency services handle that situation. The next question is about sandbags. Conflicting information on sandbags. Where do people get sandbags from? In a general rule, we feel that prevention is far better than on-the-day deployment of sandbags. That's for a couple of reasons. One is that sandbags actually don't guarantee any protection from flooding. And also they can create contamination issues once the actual floodwater has died away and can cause problems with clear up. A far better option, and one thing that we'd be working with flood wardens to achieve, is to engage with local communities, discuss in detail what the flood risk area situation is in that particular area, and to encourage people to look at their property, look at the protection measures that they have around it, and encourage them to do more property prevention now rather than waiting for an incident to happen. There are plenty of products out there that are promoted both through the National Flood Forum and the Environment Agency, and Blue Pages also have some links to people who provide flood protection measures, things like flood doors or air brick covers, that can all make all the difference in terms of people keeping their houses dry in the event of a flood situation. But of course, these things do have to be put in advance. So rather than sandbags, we'd far rather talk about those prior preparation methods. However, we do understand that not everybody will act on those that advice that people might offer out in advance. And some local authorities do offer sandbags, but you need to get the information from the specific local authority. If the typer of the question would like to drop us a note and tell us which local authority area they live in, we will be able to send that information that's specific for your area over to you. And that goes for anybody else. If you'd like to know what your local authority sandbag policy is, then we're able to provide that information. But very much to stress, that is very much we would recommend is an action that actually would rather people looked very much now what their flood risk is and put some preparation and prevention measures in instead of relying on sandbags. Okay, so no more questions in.